GM. GM. So, Sunday, 11th of Feb, GM, Super Bowl Sunday. I don't think there's going to be any Super Bowl ads today for crypto companies. At least I saw a headline of an article that there's not going to be any. Maybe the ETF issuers have realized that Super Bowl ads are bearish. If you remember, I think it was FTX done a massive Super Bowl campaign. And we all know how that ended. Anyway, and crypto.com and all these fucking scams. So this morning, there'll be a weekly outlook later where I have a deeper dive into the week to come. But just looking at today, we've had a bunch of new coins with high funding, fairly normal. But what is the difference is the change. So yesterday there was only, I think, Mover was the only one that was in yellow, and yellow means you're extremely positive funding, right? Which means more yellow equals more signs of froth and speculation. Go to the large caps. It's still pretty much muted by this measure, but I'll show you, and this will probably help you as well. I'll show you a bit of inaccuracy with the Velo charts, because it says that they're all around neutral, right? Which is basically a 0.01 or even negative like BNB and Monero. But when you actually go to Coinalyze, which is more accurate, let's say if you go to Velo here, and we look at, it's saying like AVAX funding is neutral, which is 9%, which would be about 0.01, which is just like your standard. But AVAX funding is way up, right? AVAX's funding rate is well above neutral at the moment, especially when you go into the predicted funding, which is the fastest responding, fastest moving. Put it onto OI weighted, and on balance, it's still lower. But when you look at the raw funding, you can see extreme funding on BitMEX, high funding on Kraken, high funding on WooX, extreme on BitMEX coin margined, and OKX coin margined. So the dislocations of funding rates appear at the edges first. So a note of caution for when you're using these type of heat maps is that Velo only measures Binance, Bybit, and OKX and Deribit, which will make these look more neutral than they are. Obviously, in terms of OI weighted, which is more important as a whole, this is weighted them by the level of open interest. So it gives more weight to Binance, Bybit, and OKX because they have the highest open interest. It gives less weight to BitMEX because even if BitMEX's funding is super high, there's far less open interest there. So the idea would be that there's less impact. But that's not always true because BitMEX less so, but WooX is like quite a retail, friendly exchange. It's shilled by a lot of influencers. And Kraken and BitMEX still matter. So if the funding rates are getting out of line there, is that a sign just that retail in certain areas, certain participants are getting long and getting too long at those levels? I would say so. And it's a better predictor quite often of short-term moves. But you have to apply context to it. The only reason I'm really saying this is because it's a weekend and it's about the rate of change. Yeah. So if you watched the last few daily levels, you'll know that only a few days ago, these predicted funding rates were all neutral or even negative. They were below 0.01. But now if you look at them, Bitcoin's above, ETH's above, Solana's well above. Chainlink is 9 times higher than neutral. Which you look at it and you're like, what the fuck's going on in Chainlink? That's crazy. But again, it seems to be something going on at BitMEX and WooX. Because when you OI weight Chainlinks, it drops back down to 0.03, 0.035, which is still high, but not insane, right? Chainlink's funding rate, as you can see here, over the past few months, Chainlink's funding rate has been at this level, which I'll just draw a line across, a few times. And then you can compare, right? So it was here to 3. Let's just take these 4 times. So these 4 times, first time led to a pullback. Second time led to a pullback. Third time led to a pullback. Fourth time led to a top. So along the way, there was dip, 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 and then the top. All right. So again, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to nuke to zero, but it does mean that pretty much every single time Chainlink's aggregated funding rate has gone above this level, there's been some kind of pullback, or it's marked a top. Here we had one example really where it didn't pull back right away, kind of dipped in, pushed into the highs, and then topped, and then it hasn't reached that level since. So does this mean that Chainlink is going to top? Probably quite likely that there's a pullback, right? Given that pretty much every time funding gets to this level, especially when price looks like this, which is up only, you could probably expect to see some kind of pullback. But more likely, I would imagine, I would say it's more likely that we see continuation of that, right? That is maybe more like one of these first few, that it's a dip that gets bought rather than an actual top. But a lot of that depends on Bitcoin. But it's just a bit of a note about the funding rates. So the things you can't just rely on these maps, right? Because you can see how they can be inaccurate. They're good for an overall view. Because yesterday when I looked at it, if you're comparing the map to the map, so yesterday when I looked at it at the large caps, and I have it in the trading analysis here. Yesterday when I look at large caps, this is what they look like. Okay, so there's the large caps. Here they are today. Pretty much the same, not much difference. Here's the mid caps. Let me go mid caps. More yellow, right? There's clearly more yellow on this than there was yesterday. Yesterday it was really just injective. Today it's injective, IMX, ordinals a wee bit, Rune, VeChain, just a bit more funding, bit more leverage creeping in. Small caps yesterday were pretty neutral, with just I think I posted the same one twice, didn't I? That's unfortunate. Small caps anyway. You can see Key and a couple others. Nothing too crazy, but just to show the heat maps don't give you like the granular detail that you get from Coinalyze. So using both in combination is probably better. The main thing I look at when I do my morning analysis is I just scan this first and see how does it look compared to yesterday. And this is much higher than yesterday on the predicted funding rates. And it's much higher than it was 2 or 3 days ago. So does it matter? Like, do I go out and call a top? No. Do I get short? No. None of those things are what your response should be. But you should say, price is going up. That's good. But so is funding and open interest. Okay, cool. That's what you'd expect in an uptrend. Again, it's when it gets extreme that you start to see things like pullbacks. And it also depends on what's getting traded, right? What's getting bought or sold? Is it total shit or is it strong coins with good narratives? And that's where you kind of apply the logic across it. The other way of doing it then is just to put them on a chart here. OI global, funding rate global. Right, so this is my preferred measure, the way of doing it. OI weight this for Bitcoin, which definitely matters for Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin has billions of dollars of open interest. You have to weight it by open interest because across all the venues, there's no venue of Bitcoin that's more retail heavy than others. Bitcoin's Bitcoin, right? Altcoins a little different because they have much lower open interest. But take these out, and I always exclude Bitcoin and ETH from the funding rate and the open interest calculations. So you just get all the altcoins excluding Ethereum. And this is my easiest way to look over it, each day. So OI has been steadily rising as price has risen, as you'd expect. Funding rates on Bitcoin have broadly stayed, if you zoom way out, Bitcoin funding rate is way down. It's definitely cooled off since the ETF. And it's starting to tick back up, but nothing crazy, right? You wouldn't say there's any signs of over-exuberance here. To me, this is still mostly a spot-led rally. There still seems to be some short squeeze ongoing. And Bitcoin itself, I think is in the process of marking up to a new level. As for altcoins, though, a lot of this push on alts has came on the weekend. So Friday's session closed over here, then we had Saturday, and we're to Sunday. You know, the altcoin funding's up another 500 million, altcoin open interest, sorry, up another 500 million on the weekend from having negative funding a few days ago on Wednesday. It ramped up back to neutral and then above neutral. And so the way I see this is either Bitcoin takes over and runs, which can happen, and Bitcoin certainly seems strong, as you can see here. A nice sweep out of some of the stops down there on Bitcoin, bouncing back up into this consolidation. But alts were leading briefly. There's a couple of examples here where alts went higher as Bitcoin dropped off, and we saw a further second leg down as it flushed out some alts. Alts made a new high before Bitcoin here as well, right? Alts made a new high. Bitcoin just pushed up into its high, but didn't make a new high. Then Bitcoin, it didn't really take over. They sort of followed each other. Bitcoin went up, alts went up, and then Bitcoin sold off, but alts kept going up. And that's why you're seeing this first signs of a bit of a shakeout or a bit of a drop down in altcoins. I think if I had to kind of explain how I feel the market is at the moment, I think Bitcoin's genuinely really strong. I think this is a real a markup, as you call it. Like, so this is where Bitcoin's actually just mispriced and should probably be above 50K because of a supply demand imbalance. And I think that the sell the news, people who sold the news are going to get left behind. And I think that Bitcoin's going to make a move at least to test 50, but probably to break out and move up into a higher level. And if that's happening, alts can just get a free ride, right? Bitcoin still will broadly dominate, and that's where you're looking at Bitcoin dominance and seeing how it's moving. Bitcoin dominance is having just a huge week, had several strong days, and then even on the lower time frames, not the 4 minute, no need for that, the 4 hour. Every time the alts try to move, Bitcoin keeps bouncing back. So to me, it's as simple as this. Bitcoin, really, really, really strong. Altcoins are going up because there's squeezes happening, there's people chasing in, there's longs getting in, there's all of that. But they can sort of get carried, right? It's a little bit like if you go back to the October squeeze, right? Bitcoin went up, short squeeze, fake news, pull back, grinding, squeezed up, grinding. And for like, until it got choppy in this phase here, right? It started to get choppy over here. But for quite a while, off these lows, for 30 days almost, because Bitcoin was just at the wrong price, which is what I'm trying to say here. I think Bitcoin is at the wrong price and it will reprice. The supply demand imbalance became so great down here that Bitcoin had to move from high 20s up into mid 30s. And Bitcoin tends to do this. It tends to consolidate and then mark up to a new level. It doesn't tend to just like move up a little bit at a time and stair step higher. It tends to go sideways, mark up, go sideways, mark up, go sideways, mark down, right? That's just the nature of how the market tends to move. And if that's happening again,